All right, so we are talking about spare parts, right? Not something that a lot of people like to talk about all the time. Let me start from the beginning of this journey. So we started actually from a very non-logistic related point. One of our investors is Shiraz Naim. He is responsible for dismantling production lines for different car manufacturers like Peugeot, Citroën, and the likes. And what he noticed was that whenever he goes into a production line that's about to be dismantled, so the factory is not needed anymore, there are rooms full of spare parts. Most of these have never been used, and they are also very similar across different production lines. That triggered our interest, and I investigated it quite a bit, and we came up with a concept. But first, before we talk about the concept, maybe we talk a bit about key issues with spare parts. So the common problems that we see with spare parts, and specifically industrial spare parts, so these aren't your spare parts for your car or your washing machine, these are for industrial spare parts. We see three key issues. First one being that most spare parts are actually discarded unused. Our data from material handling and logistics suggests about 75% of spare parts will actually never be used. That's by SKU, so by the type of part. The reason for that is that most spare parts are actually stored for emergencies, for risk management, and not necessarily for use. And that's because we don't know when a part will be needed, so we need to keep it on stock. So most customers that we've looked at have a high number of parts that end up being thrown away unused. Of course, spare parts also have shelf lives. So if you have a spare part sitting on a shelf, belts, electronics, these have very specific or very potentially short shelf lives, which means that if they're not used, they need to be thrown away. At the same time, data show that a lot of operators actually get stuck without having the right part. So even though there's a lot of overstocking of spare parts, quite a few operators, will say that they have gotten stuck without a spare part in recent times. And you add to that the lead time, so how long it actually takes you to get a part when you need it. And in material handling, logistics in general, that time will be, the median will be 5 weeks. That's what we've seen from actually multiple different sources. So we're quite confident about that data. In other industries, that number could be even higher. And that's because a lot of the parts used in industry are not built to stock, but built to order. Some of them have high levels of customization. So what do we do with this? What we propose to do is actually rely on a very known concept in different industries, and that's the pooling concept. And we propose to build a pool for spare parts. Well, we are building a pool for spare parts, and we already have one running. And that allows companies to share spare parts across a network. It first connects the company's own internal spare part stocks to each other, but then also to a broader network of spare parts owners or producers. So these could be manufacturers, OEMs, other operators, at one point, maybe also wholesalers, and potentially at one point also 3D printers. So basically anyone who could produce a spare part in case of an emergency. Why would that work? So we've looked at it from different angles. There's a lot of research. I'll only pick on one that actually comes from the Technical University in Munich that shows how pooling spare parts across across more than one site reduces the cost per company per part. And you can see this on the top graph. So this is the number of participants in the pool, and on the y-axis you see the costs per participant. And anywhere from 2 to 3 participants, the cost reduced dramatically, and that's because, again, many spare parts are sitting on a shelf doing nothing. If we're able to pool them, we're able to use a lot less and then share the cost, the benefits. When our internal study we did on on how viable this is, we looked at about 18 customers that had 3 generations of sorters from a similar OEM, but again, spanning more than 30 years of commissions. And we could see that each of these companies could share, so each dot here is a company in a pool, could share roughly 80 to, in some cases, 90 or 100% of their spare parts in a pool, which means that if this pool from these 18 customers were to exist, customer G could get 100% of the spare parts that they need from other participants in the pool. As I mentioned before, the pool is the core idea, but there are actually 3 types of participants and players and 3 tiers for this pool. First one in top left is the internal spare parts pool. That allows companies to pool within their own company or commercial entity. Many will say, and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking it, that should be possible today using SAP or Maximo or any ERP that is just shared across that company. Generally, I would agree, and that's actually what we thought when we started. But then, speaking to many customers, we realized that this is not happening, and there are challenges to actually implement an internal pool. One of these challenges is the quality of the data across the different sites, naming conventions, IDs, etc. Another big challenge, and that's another interesting thing, is that even if the data is there, there's not necessarily a pool concept. The pool concept also means that someone is thinking about how many parts should be, where should they be stored, what's the policy for taking them. If you don't have that, then yes, you can get parts from other companies, but you don't reap the benefits of accessing more parts. So that's the internal pool. The industry-wide spare parts pool is where we connect companies to other companies in the region so they can easily access parts. And then the third level is a supplier spare part pool. Now, in this case, I have Boimer and Lenze as example. This could and will be many, many more suppliers. We already have many more suppliers on the platform. And the idea is that we're not connected necessarily to their eShop, but to their local existing current stock, what is available right now. And the idea there is that companies can connect to that inventory, in many cases anonymously, so they don't know necessarily who they buy from, but they connect this inventory. This allows suppliers of spare parts to keep a local stock that is potentially priced at higher rates, while allowing companies to get stock in cases of emergencies. Again, this is mostly for emergencies, so these are short delivery times within a few hours, meant to solve cases where companies are stuck without a part. This is an example of a customer we're working with in the cement industry that has multiple different sites across. I didn't show all of them, but roughly 50 sites in Europe, and in the DACH region, he has over 24. So for them, that internal pool will already drastically reduce their stocking costs while increasing their availability, because as of now, when one site is stuck without a part, they typically reach out to the OEM and manufacturer, lead times are long, etc. So availability is increased automatically. But then when we overlay in the bottom, you can see in blue are all of these customers' competitors, and the orange are the customer site. You can see the possibility of where this can go. So the more sites, the closer they are, the more parts on the network, the less each site needs to stock. To do effective pooling, you actually need to do 3 things. That's good, because these are the 3 things that we are doing. The first thing you need to do is actually create the right data set. So we need to make sure that everyone that brings spare parts stock to our system actually has the right identifiers, right manufacturers, etc. That's work that we do when we onboard a new customer. And then create the actual pool, so the connection, and that's what our tool does today. It allows you to search and find parts in anyone's spare part stockroom. If that stockroom does not belong to your company, then the owner is anonymous, but you can still see the part. And finally, once the pool is there and the data is correct, we add a layer of optimization analytics that allow companies to start reducing their stock and in some cases also increasing their stock if we indicate a risk. So how does the data cleansing work? So data cleansing is actually an imperative thing for our pool, but it's also a thing that companies need to do for their own benefits. So one of the companies we worked with had more than 50% of their parts actually missing IDs or the right descriptions. That results in typically 5 to 15% of duplicates in spare part stocks, as well as issues when commissioning a part. So basically, technicians couldn't find parts when they needed. The solution that we bring to bear is getting catalogs from multiple different manufacturers. We have an automatic process that enriches the data, corrects and enriches the data. And then whatever we can't find, because of course, automation has limits, we also have data experts that supplement with research. And finally, that was what that got them was 3 things. 2 of them are on the slide. One is 50% of their parts now have the right data. We were able to reduce about 10% of duplication in their stockroom. Then finally, they were also onboarded to the pool and now have access to a really large stock of spare parts. This is a bit of how a pool like this looks. So it's a very simple search with a result that shows you typically more detail than a CMMS or an ERP system that a stock management system shows, because we do have catalog data, so we're able to say more things about the part, frequency, etc. So we don't just have a description, we have the attributes. It shows the results within your own internal stock. So if the part is there with someone that you have a commercial relationship with, you can easily just reach out and get it. And also shows results in the Sparrow network. So there could be cases where even if your own company has a site with this part, it is still further away than the network. And it still makes more sense for you to go to an external party and try and get the part. And then finally, as I said, we have a layer of optimization on top of this. And what the optimization does is takes the customer own data. That's data of the BOM list, past usage, etc. We actually look at many data points from the customer. We look at data from the catalogs, so actually understanding reliability and probability of failure for each part to understand how many parts a customer could need from a specific part. So a Siemens motor will have a different probability of failure than a Lenze motor, and they will have different probabilities of failure at different times in their life cycle. We integrate all of that data. We also integrate supply chain data. So we know who has parts because of the pool. We know what manufacturers have on stock. We know lead times. We put this in an algorithm that gives our customers a better prediction and a better assessment of how many parts they will need of each type, which allows them typically to reduce their stock quite considerably while still increasing their availability. What's the prize in it for actually pooling? And that's, I will say, not necessarily our company, right? So this is about pooling in general. The immediate benefit is higher availability and lower downtime. So that's what most companies care about, most maintenance managers care about. First of all, making sure that uptime is there. Then there's also just less waste. A lot of these parts are thrown away. That's cost, but it's also environmentally problematic, right? Reducing your stock reduces your working capital. I have not met a company that doesn't want to reduce its working capital. And finally, a lot of this pool just allows you reduces a lot of manual effort that is involved with procurement of spare parts, which is today quite a painful and effortful process. Yeah, so our believers we have people who vouch for this idea, because we do know this is a relatively novel idea, I would say, definitely in material handling. So both Dr. Boehmer, who was the CEO of Boehmer Group and our lead investor, and Professor Faulkner from the Technical University of Munich have both attested to the value and the potential in a platform like Sparrow. yeah, I think that's it for me. Christian, I think we can take questions now.
Yes, and I'm again allowed to say something. So thank you for your presentations. And yeah, as you told me last year on Logistic Congress Berlin, I was pretty excited about the spare parts platform. And I guess the first thing that came to my head was, so what's in for suppliers? The value added for the customers is obvious, but what's in for suppliers?
That's a great question. So for suppliers, we see a few benefits. It depends really if they're a part supplier and OEM. There are different benefits depending where you are in the supply chain. Mostly, of course, it's better customer service. If you know what your customers have and what they need, you're better able to stock your own spare part stock and you're better able to reduce lead times and work better for your customer. Of course, the emergency channel for selling spare parts at higher rates is a great and interesting offering for manufacturers of parts. If you're today Siemens, you typically charge the same price for a customer if you have the part on stock or if you have to produce it. So there's less incentive on a per part basis to stock a part. However, if because of Sparrow, companies can know which parts will be needed and also price them accordingly, so price the stocking of a part, that means that they can actually generate quite a lot of, generate quite healthy margins on this channel.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and you told us that Meir is one of the joiners of the platform. Are there actually only parts from Meir available on the platform, or are other suppliers also joined yet?
That's a great question. So Meir has invested a minority share in this company, but it's an open platform, and we actively encourage and invite more OEMs. We do have other manufacturers and OEMs on the platform, but we invite everyone. We want this to be as big as possible, and Meir, as well as an investor, knows this and are quite open to having as many participants as possible. And the customers that we have already on the platform, we're close to 25 sites. They are all doing, they have a combination of machines. Actually, Meir is maybe not even 50% of the machines that they have. It's a lot less. So yeah, it's a completely open platform.
Okay, perfect. Are you aiming for a special industry with your platform, or is it more a wide area that you're focusing
on? We're right now starting with material handling, logistics. That's where we're starting, but we're also looking to expand to other industries. The technology is basically the same, and we are looking to grow into things like chemicals and cement and other industries in the coming future. But that really sort of depends on how many people we can get. A platform like this requires, to get started, a lot of first early participants.
Right. Yeah, and I guess another question I asked you last time was, has something like this been there before? Is this the first platform like this?
So no, I wish I were that smart. I shamelessly copy from others. There is a platform like this existing in airlines. It's called the IATP. It's a commercial pooling solution for aircraft, so they can reduce their what's called aircraft on the ground problem, where aircrafts are broken or dysfunction without spare parts. That exists. In addition, there have been smaller pools and local cases. We've seen many of these, but they generally come from some sort of a local relationship between a few manufacturers or a few producers that just know each other from a club and have set up something. This is the first that we've seen that is sort of industry-wise and is trying to get everyone on board. But since we have seen the ITP solution, we do know that it's technically possible and that there's a lot of value in the solution.
Okay, perfect. thanks a lot. Are there any further questions from the audience? Gibt es noch weitere Fragen von den Zuschauern? Das sieht nicht so aus. Thanks a lot, Meir.